All right, it is week 2 of wandering in the wilderness. So this week we will focus on Exodus 16, the entire chapter. So here now up till about verse 15. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and the Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around with pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into the desert to starve the entire assembly to death." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they follow my instructions. On the 6th day they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you up out of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumblings against him. Who are we that you should grumble against us?" Moses also said, "You will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" While Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked toward the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. The Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost off on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread of the Lord, that is bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded each one of us, is to gather as much as he needs. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent." So this is the part we want to focus on today. And last week, as you remember, it was only 3 days before the Israelites started grumbling that they didn't have water. Now, water is the first basic need. You have to have that one first. You can go a little bit longer without food. At the beginning of this passage, it said that at a month of wandering, a month of not really being sure of where you're going, a month of going through whatever amount of food you manage to store in your stuff and what little bit you're scraping by with, at a month, they started grumbling against their leadership. They said, "Moses and Aaron, we can't handle this. This is too much." So they started grumbling about being hungry. But this time, the grumbling is more intense than it was when it was just the water that they needed. They said, "You know what? We had better food than this in Egypt. I wish we were back there." So they have risen to a higher grumbling level. And let's just face it, when people are hungry, they get cranky and they start grumbling. It happens to the best of us. It even happens to this man over here. But then again, he probably could tell stories about me as well. So that's where we have encountered the grumbling Israelites again, that have maybe forgotten that they have just received freedom, that they do have gifts from God, and that they're still unsure of this wilderness trek.
You know, when an army goes out to battle, one of the most important things that they need to take care of is their supply line. This is where they're going to get their food. This is going to be where they get their water. This is going to be where they get munitions. That is their lifeline. That's what they need to take care of. And one of the ways that opposing armies can really be successful is if they can cut that supply line. They render their opponents helpless. There's really nothing they can do. They have no supplies. In some sense, what God is doing here is cutting Israel's supply line back to Egypt. They had been used to depending on the Egyptians for everything. Now, granted, The Egyptians were their masters. The Egyptians were the ones who had enslaved them. The Egyptians were the one who put them to forced labor. But they had also, that was who took care of their needs. That's who did whatever it is that kept them going, that kept them surviving. God is Israel's new master. God is their God, and he's teaching them that time is over, that supply line is broken. Now, the person who you depend on is God.
So here we have God is starting to provide for their needs. Now, God has always really been providing for their needs and bringing them out of Egypt, giving them freedom, bringing them out to a new place to follow a new leader. But God does not want them to feel abandoned or lost, or that they're not heard. So more than once, I hope you notice the repetition in there. God wants his people to know that he hears them. Tell them that I hear their grumblings. Tell them that I'm going to respond. Tell them that their needs are going to be met. So when it happens, when the meat comes in the evening and the bread is ready in the morning, it's like this weird, dewy, flaky substance. It is so weird that what they literally write in the Hebrew is a word that means, what is it? They don't know what it is. As we'll find out later in this passage, that Hebrew word is manna, but it literally means, what is it? They don't even know what it is. But it is the bread from heaven. It is the sustenance that will keep them going. But it is unexpected and new. It's so new they don't even know what it is. So it takes a while to transition to something new. And maybe that's why this whole journey and wandering in the wilderness is going to take 40 years, is the people have a lot to transition to. It takes more than just a minute to transfer allegiances, to realize who they're depending on, to realize that they can reach out to God, and not only reach out, but trust and know that it will be followed up each and every day. All they know at this point in this passage is that food is coming, but they're not quite sure what it is, and they haven't learned to trust it or to trust God on this journey yet.
What is it? Israel's question can often be our question. What is it that's happening in my life? What is this lesson that God is trying to teach me? Why? These are really the questions that come to us. And as we spend this time in Lent trying to, seek God's face, a lot of times what we find isn't what we expected. We have our idea of how the spiritual life should go, and generally it goes a lot faster than God is willing to go. But we ask that question, what is it? We ask that question because we were not expecting the things that God provides. It takes discernment. It takes time to figure things out. Can we be faithful? Can we be dependent on God while that questioning process is going on? That's the difficulty of trusting in God, is that we want things to happen quickly. We want our stomachs to be filled and our needs to be met right away. But when God is in control, it doesn't always happen on that timetable. And when it happens, it doesn't necessarily happen the way that we think it should. That's the challenge, I think, as we go through Lent, is to, as we see things that are not the things that we want, they're not the things that we expect, they're not the things that we thought were the things that sustain us. How do we recognize them? Slowly, through prayer, through discernment, through seeking God's face. That's our Lenten challenge, and that's really where we go throughout these 40 days.